Have you ever looked around at your life and wondered, why don't I feel like I have enough, even when everything should feel secure? In today's episode, I'm joined by Elizabeth Husserl, financial advisor and author of The Power of Enough, a deeply personal and practical guide to reclaiming our sense of worth and sufficiency. Her work beautifully weaves together money, meaning, and legacy. I encourage you to pick up a copy of her book. I absolutely love it. I'm about halfway through and just can't put it down. In this episode, we explore how scarcity gets passed down through generations and how we can shift from a constant consumption to a state of embodied wealth rooted in purpose, connection, and sufficiency. Elizabeth also shared her personal story of loss and the call to write this book. And she shared a beautiful framework with us called the Wealth Mandala that invites us to redefine how we think of wealth. It's an exercise. A link to it will be in the show notes. I encourage you to participate with us. So, whether you're navigating financial uncertainty or simply craving a more meaningful relationship with money, this episode will nourish you. It really nourished me. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. Elizabeth Husserl, welcome to the Legacy of Love podcast. I'm so happy you're here with me.
Sarah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, yes. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I've been listening to your book, The Power of Enough. I mean, I applaud you for the work that you've put out into the collective. I think that we need this
Mm,
so much. And I love the title.
thank you.
I think we just have to start with when, I'm sure there's a story, but when did you feel the call and know that, Elizabeth, it's time to write a book?
Oh my gosh, I feel chills in my back when you even just asked that question, Sarah, because I think for me, writing the book was almost like having a child of sorts, right? I have a 14-year-old and I joke and I'm like, this is your sibling, right? This book.
Yeah.
I think, it's like, and it feels that way. It's the first time I've forgotten to pick her up at a bus stop because I'm like, oh, this is what parent with two kids feel like. But I think I would say two things. I've been on a journey in kind of my relationship to money and wealth. I'm a financial advisor. I get to have these conversations with clients all day long. But in between kind of this intersection between finance and economics and spirituality and psychology since my early 20s, since my undergrad work and my graduate studies. But I want to say the real catalyst actually happened in March 2020. If all of you remember, March 2020 was the start of the pandemic. It wasn't because of the start of the pandemic. It was because I actually lost a really close friend to blood cancer, and we
Oh,
couldn't go be with her because of the start of
oh,
the pandemic. So I don't remember, I mean, even though I'm a financial advisor, and I remember the fear of my clients and guiding them through that process, I remember grief of losing a friend who was 49 years old and
mm,
died without putting a lot of her creative dreams into fruition, into action. So I just remember this feeling like we don't know how long we have, Sarah, right? Like any of
yeah.
us could be taken in an instant. And I was like, I've been thinking about this book for 10 years. It was fire under my butt to hire a book coach, commit to writing
Oh,
it. I'd put my ad offices on Fridays. I told all my business partners, no more client meetings on Fridays. I'm going to write the book. And within a year and a half, the first real draft manuscript was done. So I
oh,
will just honor that friend. Her name is Kathy Ann Woodruff, and she actually had her 5-year death anniversary yesterday. So it's a perfect
wow.
timing to honor her legacy will live on. Her legacy of love will live on because
Uh,
she inspired me to give my work to the world.
wow. I love that synchronicity. We're just going to
Hmm.
follow on that because, I feel like those breadcrumbs in life, it just kind of leads us. So, wow. Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I think that that's so much, even with, launching this podcast and having conversations like this. It's one of the sad, but I think fortunate pieces of, the work that I do is that really death and end of life care
Yeah.
is kind of always a thread in every story, even if it's like post-death trust administration that I'm doing and no longer working with
Hmm.
my clients. I know that I'm the one that's really being the one that's carrying out their final wishes.
Death is that catalyst, right? Death is a
Yes.
catalyst that invites us to live life more fully.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's absolutely that. So you've been on quite a journey.
Yeah.
I mean, you hinted at that this has been a 20 plus year
Yeah, journey, right?
journey and process. So, listening to the book and hearing your story, I mean, let's for listeners that aren't reading yet, but again, I'm going to
Hmm.
encourage everyone to pick up a copy. What brought you kind of to this work and this interest?
Yeah. Well, I'll say a couple things. One, I've been a person who always has one foot in both worlds. I love mathematics and finance and puzzle making, right? Every time a client walks into my office, like, oh, a new puzzle I get to figure out. Equally important to me is human psychology and spirituality and the understanding of the human psyche. Like, I've always loved these two worlds. And so financial
Yes, me
advising
too.
was a natural place, right? Or estate planning, they're natural places where you can take really tangible, practical, concrete data and bring it alive with meaning when you start to really understand what matters to people, right? I didn't know that in my 20s, but I knew my passions back then. And so I started, my undergraduate was in economics and finance. Then I went, my dad wanted me to go work for the World Bank. I'm like, you know what, Dad, I have a couple more adventures in me. And so I ended up living for 2 years in Oaxaca, Mexico, which is the opening of the book, as I talk about a couple years when I'm in Oaxaca. And I was there teaching Indigenous women how to create saving and loan cooperatives, like a really tactical tool around building financial resources in their community. And
Mm.
it was an amazing experience because I feel like I was actually bringing real concrete advice to help them not be dependent on loan sharks to take out loans to send their kids to school or to get through health emergencies. It was a really important tool. But then I started to realize, I wasn't there just to teach. I was equally absorbing and learning that they lived life differently to what I had been exposed to in my more modern upbringing. And that for them, the slice of the pie that I was helping them with, financial stability, was only one way in which they experienced wealth. They were super joyful in other ways of their lives. And when I started to ask them, well, how would you define wealth? What they started to tell me, Sarah, was wealth was first and foremost physical health. If they were not healthy, they were not wealthy. It was their relationships to each other, their dignity, their ability
Mm.
to choose how they would create, political rights and their political voices, their connections to nature. And I was like, this is fascinating. Yes, I can help them strengthen one area, but their kind of slice of pie or their wealth diversification was very different than what I was taught in college, right? I was taught that
Right.
economics was the allocation of scarce resources. So already in the definition of economics, we're talking about scarcity. So we're feeling this kind of like baseline that scarcity is the assumption, and we're trying to solve for that. And I was like, that was not their reality. And so I realized my work in Oaxaca was done. It's time to go back to the States, right? And work with people who potentially have a lot more material resource, but are still feeling lack and poverty in their life. And to ask, what is that about? And I'll say one last thing, Sarah, before the next question is that I started to then make connection that very much resonated with my upbringing, right? I was raised in,
Mm.
I would say, upper middle class in New Orleans, upper middle class family, because both my parents worked. My dad was a doctor, my mom was a therapist. So it was dual income. I never lacked anything. But there was still a sense of scarcity at times, not always, but at times in our home environment because of some kind of emotional needs that weren't being met, right? Longer story, but there was just, I mean, we all can relate to that. And I was like,
Yes.
all my material needs are met, but I feel scarcity. What is that about? Right. And I started to trace it back to my grandfather who had left Austria during the Second World War because he was Jewish. So he was fleeing the Holocaust, ended up in Colombia, very afraid for the next world war. So basically had the trauma of persecution in his body, passed on
Oh,
scarcity to my father, passed on scarcity to me. And here I am as a new mother. And I'm like, wait a second. I don't want to pass on scarcity to my daughter, especially if it's not my reality. So I committed to doing this work of understanding how I was holding on to scarcity, how I was limiting myself from experiencing wealth alongside accumulating it, and what were the tools and techniques that I could teach myself, teach my clients, and contribute to the world, right? This is my legacy of love, is contributing
Yes.
this knowledge to the world because we do not have to live in that place of scarcity.
Yeah, we don't. Oh my gosh, I just loved everything that you said. It resonates so
Mm.
much. I mean, we shared before recording, that I've done a lot of work. I've worked with multiple money coaches. I've had
Yeah,
some of them on this podcast. I think that these conversations, we just can't have them enough. I had a business
yeah,
coach once tell me, think about the number of weight loss and diet books that there are out
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Like we cannot have this enough, especially
yeah,
in this country, right? I
yeah,
mean, capitalism is on overdrive.
yeah,
And I'm sorry, we've been sold this, quote unquote American dream that, I really think we're at the point where really we're at a crisis, collectively. We can point
yeah,
at so many pieces of where
yeah,
it's not working. And I think we're really forced to reconcile this with the climate crisis, really, where we really
100%.
are, where I think so much of that is connected to, greed and not knowing, right? This enough point, this
Yeah.
enough. So kind of even that definition of wealth that, that was painted in Oaxaca, you're like, I mean,
Mm.
I feel that in my body, as a woman, as a mother, of like, that
Yeah.
is the truth, right? That is the truth of what wealth is. I mean, if you don't have health, if you don't have community, I mean, you could have all the money in the world and it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And so let's pause there because you've given so many nuggets, right? And so let's clarify for our listeners is that money is a tool and a technology, at times really
Yes.
important one. Wealth is a state of well-being. So we need to recognize that money and wealth are different things. Money does not define your wealth. Money does not define you. And I think that's one of the biggest misuses of money in our contemporary culture. And as soon as I say that, Sarah, money's like, oh, thank
Oh,
God someone's saying that out loud,
it's
right?
so
Because
true.
we scapegoat money because we can't figure it out, right? And I want to speak to the piece because you gave such a great metaphor on the climate, but also just on the rampant episode of obesity in in our culture, because what happens is that consumption in itself is a neutral act. And I know that sometimes ruffles people's feathers when I say that, but consumption in itself is a neutral act. And just think of it in terms of like, I need to consume water and calories to survive, right? But the quality and the quantity of what we consume matters. And that's the distinction. And so what happens is that we're an overdrive of consumption of goods and resources and materials, which is impacting our climate 100%, but it's not making us feel satisfied. And that's like the hungry ghost syndrome of like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, I just keep eating, keep consuming, and I'm not satisfied. So I keep consuming because my body is telling me I'm not full, right? Scarcity brain is real. It is proven because
Yes.
that is how we survive. But the way to offset the scarcity brain that is on overdrive is to start to teach your body or to learn, I should say it differently, to learn from your body because your body has visceral
Mm,
somatic clues that can teach you when you feel satisfied in your day. And what I
mm,
mean by that, each and every one of us knows the difference between a meal that is nourishing, right? When you
mhm.
sat down, you're like, oh my God, my taste buds are on fire. And what satisfies you, Sarah, doesn't need to be the same meal that satisfies me. But when we find what nourishes us, we just kind of pause and take it in. Versus we all know what it feels too when we're eating on the run and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just have for lunch? Because I was at my computer or I was like on the go or I was in my car. Those are empty calories. And so when we start to recognize, I can be a conscious consumer, right? Again, neutral act, but I can bring the quality to what I'm consuming and start to pay attention to what viscerally gives me a sense of satisfaction and enough. You start to discover the power of enough from the inside out instead of trying to do mental math and figure out a number that is always changing. And you're like, oh my God, no wonder I'm on this relentless chase for more because I'm chasing a number and I'm not feeling enough alongside accumulating enough.
Yes. I mean, really, yes.
Mm,
Honestly, just an example in my life that came to mind is so it was a bit of a dark night of the soul season for me,
mm,
and I was like 24, 25, and quit a job, left a relationship. I was also homesick, but I was living out on a property in Placer County in
okay.
California.
Yeah, I know Placer County.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I had family friends that were chiropractors
Mm,
and they lived on 5 acres. And anyways, I basically had like a live work situation as I was just really in the soul searching, which
yeah.
mind you, I found the career that I'm doing now because of that
Yeah.
pause, which it
Yeah.
was like 9 months. And really, I was broke. I still had
Hmm.
my student loans. I had no income. At that point, I felt like I had no direction. And I remember living on the property, and it was full of these like old, well-established fruit trees.
Mm,
And there was something of like this feeling of this overwhelming like abundance and overflow that even I'll be honest, in my day-to-day now, I sometimes don't even feel. I live in
yeah.
Silicon Valley and it's a
Yeah.
concrete jungle and everyone's rushing. And I remember just feeling so connected to the earth
Yep.
and like to also the beauty, like these trees just really didn't need much
Hmm.
and they would just pour out just like too much fruit, like the
Hmm.
whole family couldn't eat it. It was going to the neighbors and also to the clients that they were working on. So anyways, that image and that experience has always stayed with me of really what like abundance feels
Yeah.
like in my body, right? That fruit tree.
I love that. Can we just stay there for a second? Because you
Yeah.
gave some really powerful metaphors that I think I just want to highlight. And one of it is, funny enough, you said you were broke, and I think you were referring to like the financial stability slice of the pie, right? You were going through
Yes.
transition. You probably weren't earning. You're probably going through the dark night, trying to kind of understand what's happening. So notice, right? We go through that in economics. We go through our recessions of growth, recession, depression, growth, recession, depression. And when we go through recession, depression, it's about recess, depress, take your foot off the pedal and
Yes.
see what's percolating, right? If you hadn't taken that pause, right, the great pause, then you may have not listened to what the next chapter of your professional life was supposed to be. But I think what is striking to your example, Sarah, is that it's a lot easier to take that pause. It doesn't necessarily make it less scary, but you were in connection to some of these other needs in your wealth map
Oh,
that potentially
absolutely.
gave you that sense of feeling security that was non-monetary, right? And that's a deeper sense of security that goes way beyond our bank accounts and our investments, right? They have a role to play, but they cannot be all of our security blanket because then we're stuck in this dependency with money, right? And so I love that you spoke about feeling the abundance of nature, feeling fed, right? You don't really have to try too hard, right? Or feeling the land, or probably the community, or the abundance of sharing when there was an overflow. And that is part of what we have lost in our modern world.
Yeah, I so agree. And it really, I went to your website and I did the Wealth Mandala worksheet. So
Yeah.
I think let's kind of touch upon that just for
Yeah.
listeners. But I would love to share some, just even my experience going through that exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe I'll describe it first and then we'll take your experience so that they know what we're
Yeah.
referring to. Okay. So, as I said before, a big piece of kind of what I'm arguing is that money and wealth are different things, right? Money is a tool and technology that we use for exchange, store of value. Wealth is a state of well-being. But if I just kept it at that, you'd be like, that sounds great, Elizabeth, but that's still abstract, right? And there's too much in money that feels abstract. So what I did is that the wealth mandala is a framework, right, that takes the science of human needs and puts it onto a mandala, which is a Sanskrit word for circle. And I chose it on purpose, Sarah, because mandala is a tool that they use to move from suffering to joy, right? How do we move from suffering in our relationship to money and wealth to joy? So
Yes.
what it does is that, so, we're familiar with the kind of human needs through Maslow, right? He was the first one who brought this idea of self-actualization and personal growth in conversation to some of our other human needs like shelter and food, et cetera, more survival needs. So I took Maslow's work and I added it to a work of an economist from Chile, Manfred Max Neef, who added this idea of satisfiers. So the way it works is that human needs are universal, right? So let's throw out the window this idea of am I needy or am I not? No, we're all human. We all have needs. How
Yes.
we satisfy the needs is unique and personal. So that's the difference. So the wealth map is literally a circle. So imagine a pie with slices. And so we have financial stability, safety, physical health. We have freedom, purpose, and understanding, belonging, connection, curiosity, leisure, touch, and there's space for, if you're oh need, if I didn't say it. And so the idea with this map is that you take a moment in time and you say, okay, currently in my life, how fulfilled am I feeling in each slice of the pie on a scale of 1 to 10? One being actually not very fulfilled at all. I'm feeling lack in this area or perhaps poverty. 10 feeling I'm actually really fulfilled. I know how to fill this slice of the pie. So you do your wealth mandala, right? You write the number and then you color it in. And I like to tell Sarah, once you color it in, put it on the wall and take a step back and be like, okay, what's the impression that I first get of the snapshot in time? And I like to tell people, be gracious with yourself. Much like if you were to peer into a rose, a flower, the
Mhm.
rose petals or the flower petals aren't perfect, right? They're imperfect in their nature. And so first and foremost, give yourself the graciousness of knowing we're not shooting for a perfectly filled out circle. It's going to be dynamic. Then I tell people, go to those areas of your life that you're feeling satiated or satisfied and fulfilled and ask yourself, what's working? What do you naturally know how to do? What are the areas you have naturally built? It starts to kind of reveal some of the value of your life. And then in those areas, what strategies are you using that require money and which strategies are non-monetary? Because the more we have awareness too of how we're satisfying these different needs without the use of money, the more we can also break the dependency of money to feel wealthy. Right. And
Oh,
so a very clear example is like in the sliver of touch, you could be like, oh, I love massage. I want more touch. I could go do a weekly massage. That would add up on my spreadsheet. And I'm like, maybe I do a once a month massage or a quarterly massage or a birthday massage. But I need to actively tell my husband, you know what, babe, I need a 15-second hug. Right. Or with my daughter, hey, instead of just saying goodnight, come and, let's give a hug before we go to bed. How do I add in touch in non-monetary ways? So it's a very simple concept, but a very deep framework where you can start to diversify your wealth portfolio to cover all of your human needs, not just the financial stability one.
I love that. And I really love the exercise. I haven't colored it in. I'll be honest.
Hopefully you do after our conversation today.
I will.
Uh,
No, I absolutely will. Honestly, my takeaway, even before
yeah.
coloring it in, was just like really feeling this overwhelming sense of appreciation and gratitude. Because, in all
Mm,
honesty, I mean, it's not to toot my own horn, but a lot of these areas I really felt, like
yeah.
either full or pretty darn close.
Yeah.
And some of that has to do is like I do have a career that thankfully is just so aligned, and it's not taking away from me. It just fills up my cup. And I have this podcast, and I get to have amazing conversations with people like you. And I'm also a mother, and I'm also still breastfeeding, so my touch cup
Mm.
is
Saturated.
yes, saturated. But you want to know what was
Yeah.
pretty low? I mean, you won't be surprised.
Yeah.
It's leisure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've known that, right? I just
Yeah.
need a little solitude, a little space away.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love that. So funny because the breastfeeding is actually Manfred Max Neef's favorite example for a
Mm,
synergistic satisfier, which is a strategy that touches many needs. And so it touches for you and for baby, or for
yes.
your toddler, it touches touch and connection and belonging and safety. So that's a great example where one satisfier is actually filling like lots of slices of the pie. So that's really important. The thing around leisure, it's not going to be surprising to you, Sarah. I cannot tell you how many times that is what my client says, right?
Yeah.
So many other areas are full. It literally from a 9 year, that's not true. I think the youngest I've heard is a 14-year-old where leisure is like low, all the way to my older clients, right? And a lot of times when I start digging a little bit deeper, it's because we're moving so fast, right,
Yeah.
in the society. But the really deeper thing that I hear, Sarah, is that we don't know how to be off, how to
Yeah.
turn off. We're so addicted to productivity that even on
Yes.
our days off, we're doing something. We're gardening, we're fixing, we're shopping, we're moving, we're cleaning. And so, I was having this conversation with my 14-year-old because I asked her to do the wealth mandala. I'm like, for Valentine's, that's what mom wants. Like, I want you to sit down and do the wealth mandala with me. I asked my husband and
Oh.
my daughter, I'm going to cook you brunch. This is our Valentine's activity, right? And so we did it. And it's funny because we were having the conversation around leisure. And I'm like, and she just started freshman in high school. And so she's overwhelmed with homework, overwhelmed with school
Of
sports
course.
activities. We've tried to really balance things. So I asked her, what do you do in your time off? And she's like, Mom, I scroll Instagram. I was like, I'm going to hold my judgment because we
Yeah.
obviously have them as parents. And I'm like, okay, how do you feel after your time after scrolling? She's like, I'm exhausted. Like, I don't feel any more rest. I'm like, bingo. That's the piece, right? If you are looking at that leisure sliver and you're not feeling rested with the time you dedicate to it, what needs to start to change?
That's really hits home. That
Yeah.
does, right? I mean, well, and it's funny because I have a meditation practice, and honestly, that's been like my saving grace
Yeah.
during, this season of life. It's like
Yeah.
the messy middle where everything's pulling at you.
Yeah.
And even it's like, yeah, of course, like, my 10 to 15-minute morning meditation, that's not enough when you look at, right, the busy lives that we live now. It's
Mm-hmm.
like there's
Mm-hmm.
just so many demands, and that, like, when you look at, okay, 15 minutes, but the rest of my day I'm kind of running in and out of meetings, a podcast recording, meeting with a client, then picking up my daughter.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and it's like it's yes, it's building that in.
Yeah, but I think it's the quality too. Like if you're like really
Mm.
right now in this season of life, all I get is 15 minutes, you make those 15 minutes count,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm similar to you, Sarah. I have my 10, mine is 10 minutes, my 10-minute guided meditation every morning. And there's mornings where I'm negotiating with myself. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm like, I should still get on to work emails now. I mean, we all do it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I committed to my 10-minute morning meditation. And I
Yeah.
have to keep building the muscle. And the day I do it versus the day I don't is widely different.
This goes, nicely, I think, into because part of my practice, but at least the last year, has really been on gratitude and
Yeah.
appreciation.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure that you've experienced this. And I'm just curious, even with like this book launch and stuff, it's like, how good can we stand it? And sometimes just like feeling, when
Mhm.
I feel that kind of feeling of like appreciation and gratitude, I can feel myself kind of tap out. And some days it's even at like 5 minutes where it's like, I can't even allow myself to feel like this good and this lovely.
This is a great question, Sarah. I have to say, in all the 50 podcasts I've been in, no one's asked me this one. So this is a great question. Did you want to say something before I answer?
No,
I'm like,
no, I'm glad that gave you
yeah.
enough. So
Totally. So I would say a couple things, right? So what we appreciate appreciates, right? Lynn Twist, who
yes,
wrote the foreword of my book, right? That's one of her favorite
I know. And
phrases.
I mean, it just, I'm so happy for you. Your book is amazing. And I have to say, Lynn, twice when
Yes.
before I launched the podcast, you have your dream guest, and Lynn is
Yeah.
definitely on that list. So,
Yeah, she's amazing. She just turned 80 and she is
oh
a
my
powerhouse,
gosh.
right? Like
Yeah.
I loved being able to work with her for the last year and a half in preparation of the book. But that's one of
Wow.
my favorite. It's like driven in my head. What you appreciate appreciates.
It's so
Now,
true.
there's Lynn and I would have this conversation because Lynn's contribution to the field when she wrote Soul of Money 20 years ago, phenomenal book as well. She brought in this idea of sufficiency, right? How do we know when we have enough, right? Super
Yes.
great question. I bring in this idea of satiation to complement
Mm,
sufficiency, and it's different than gratitude. So I'm going to answer your question kind of in a roundabout way, which is gratitude is very much a heart-centered emotion, right? My heart is bursting, and to your point, you're like, oh my gosh, can I take it after 5 minutes? So satiation is a visceral body center experience. And what I mean by that is when you start to feel that gratitude, Sarah, I'm going to encourage you the next time you do it to literally like close your eyes, see yourself being like taken to that brim of like, can I take this anymore? I'm going to explode, and literally swallow. Right.
mm,
And when you swallow, you're able to watch that energy move all the way down your body into every single cell, letting all of you recognize that in this moment, you are in deep gratitude, you're in deep fulfillment, you're tapping into deep meaning. And that's when you start to nourish, right? You're like watering every cell of your body, and you're teaching your body how to compound meaning, much like our investment accounts compound interest. And the
mm.
more you do that, your energetic body starts to grow and your physical container gets bigger and you hold more. And that's what becomes this overfilling cup that just like, you just generate, right? And I do think we have the capacity to be that level of vibration that activates other people. I mean, that's how we're catalysts in the world. But I think I wanted to make the distinction between appreciation, gratitude is heart filled, satiation is
Mm.
body filled. And so when there's times when you don't know how to digest such a big emotion, literally swallow it, let your body grow bigger when you do. And the side effect to that, right, or the return on that investment of time is letting your body know what fulfillment, satisfaction, purpose, and meaning feels like. That's how you embody wealth.
Mm, I love that. I was literally doing that
Yeah.
as you're walking me through it, and I feel it. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a tingling, honestly, all through my arms and legs. And
Yeah.
I really applaud your work. And I can tell you're just, really the real deal, which is just, it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's
Oh,
like I think it's similar to you. We have feet in both worlds, right? You have
yes.
feet in the legal world, and you know all the structures, and you know the language, and you know the instruments and vehicles to use for clients, and you have a foot in kind of like this more energetic human world of like, let's have all of this make sense and create meaning, because if not, what's the point? Right? And so I feel very fortunate that I have a foot very much rooted in the financial world with all the words, like concepts, terminologies, but I'm listening for something deeper. And so, for example, with my clients, I don't use the word net worth. I use the word asset size because I'm committed to decoupling this idea
Mm.
that worth comes with money. No, the power of enough is a human birthright. And we can fill our cup of enough, sometimes with money and sometimes without money. But our asset size does not determine our ability to fill our well of worthiness.
I love that. I love how you're teasing apart all of these concepts because we really need to. And I think
Mm-hmm.
having more awareness around the words that we use, I mean, this has been absolutely, even my own practice, and I'm still growing into it. We have a 2-year-old, and, she already knows money. She knows money. We go to the farmer's
Yeah.
market and
Yeah.
she asks for money. She's really interested in it. And I've had moments of, pausing my husband in conversation. It's like, how is it that we really want to introduce this and
Mm.
talk to this? And kind of the example that you gave earlier on. I'm kind of blanking on the exact example, but you were talking just about as a mother where it's like, oh yeah, this stops here with me.
Yeah, I don't want to pass scarcity on to my daughter.
Yeah, we don't want to pass
Hmm.
this on. And
Yeah.
with my own like family system and makeup, I mean, so much of why I've worked in this area personally is because I didn't realize until I was almost 30 that I had gone through significant financial trauma.
Yeah.
And wow, walking around not knowing that, not having language
Yeah.
around that. I mean,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, by the time I was 18, my family had lost everything, not once, but twice.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that shapes you. I mean,
Oh,
losing
100%.
like losing your home, losing everything, being off on your own, it was scary. And that's so much where, not passing that down to the next
Yeah.
generation, I think is just so much of where I feel passionate about. This is work that we can do, as we wake up collectively and as
Yeah.
parents and really as we reflect on our legacy.
100%. I just want to honor the vulnerability of you sharing that, Sarah. And I'm sure you maybe have shared it before in the podcast because I think
Yeah.
that with like when we lose everything, I mean, we're stripped naked.
Yeah.
Right? We're stripped
Yeah.
naked. And in that moment, we are forced to see what we're made of, right? So there's a beauty in it. But it's often when you go through it, you're like, okay, I made it through, but I don't wish that on anyone. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
absolutely.
Those are rites of passage and initiations that probably have made you who you are, but boy, was that hard going through it. And it's not what you wish on your daughter, right? And so I want to go back to the farmers market example because, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
I love farmers market. And I want to say it's one of the easiest places to practice. I mean, I'll say it differently. It's a great place to practice our relationship with money because there's so much like goodness, right? To be able
Yeah,
to like
everything's
consume it.
yeah,
And so one
delicious
of the
and
things that
fun.
I would do with my daughter is that whenever we would go to the farmers market, because it's like one of the things that's open at, 7 a.m. on a Sunday. So I get it. We'd go to the one here in the DMV
Yeah.
and we would only take, in my case, we take $40 cash. That is what we would take. I would take the cash, and my daughter knew that we were going to spend it all, but we only had $40 to spend. And so we got to be creative every week. What did we want to spend it on? So it became this fun game where it was about putting that money into flow, right? We had currency to exchange with. And each week was a little bit different. Do we want strawberries this week? Do we want flowers? Do we want blueberries? And we would like go buy things and then go sit down and listen to the musicians and like eat our whole pint of strawberries, right? But it was about engaging with the local economy within parameters that we knew and had planned for. And the objective was to put it all back into the flow. And there was something very healing for myself in
I
that of
love
like,
that.
I'm going to trust, and I don't need to hoard this money. I don't need change. I did my budget. I know that that's my weekly farmer's market number, $40. Here we go. And for my daughter, who was 5 at the time, she's like, that's a lot of money. Woohoo, let's go play. And it was so much fun. We would have so much fun together.
Oh, I love that. Well, that's exactly why I love the farmers market, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole vibe. There's music, it's an activity and you're getting groceries and supporting your local farmers. I mean, I just love it. But I have to also share. So I'm really glad that you went back to that point. I obviously we wouldn't have otherwise. This is actually a point of contention in in my marriage because my husband's like, we could go to Trader Joe's and spend a fraction of the price. So I'm like, oh, that's now we'll make it a game and we'll have a nice contained budget and we'll all
Yeah.
be happy.
And I think use then the Wealth Mandala tool and
Yes.
sit down and say, you know what, here's what the farmers market represents. It represents participation. It's how I want to participate in the community, right? It represents connection. It represents belonging because I'm building relationships with my neighbors, right? Yes, he may experience it as a negative satisfier in financial stability because there's cheaper ways to buy your fruit, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
then you start to put it and you're like, okay, if this is our food budget for the month, how do we allocate it between Trader Joe's, which I also love, but
Yes.
and the farmers market, and then you understand it within a bigger map, right? So that it's not just the cheaper thing wins. And I'm not saying, you know what I mean? We don't have frameworks
Yes.
to be able to have those conversations with our partners, right? The same thing, like we just trade an electric car. And my husband's like, let's go gas. I'm like, no, I want to stay electric because that's how I want to participate. It's not just the financial stability. That is how I want to participate in the world. And so you just have different language for it.
I love it. I love it. You've spent a lot of time, I can tell, honing this craft,
Oh,
refining
yeah.
your language. You're definitely many steps ahead of me on the process. This has been a lot of fun, Elizabeth. I really have learned a lot and have taken away a lot, along with better negotiating skills with my husband.
Totally. Yeah, or negotiating skills for work, right? It's not just about more money. So, yes, no, we learn a lot about ourselves with this wealth mandala.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even think about using it in that, like with that example where,
Yeah.
okay, where, when we are spending money, that we can really look to that. And then just going back to that original example that you gave, right, of breastfeeding,
Yeah.
where it satisfies so many pieces. It's not just one thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a natural one here, and to start a conversation with your listeners, right, is like just in estate planning, right? Right. This
Yeah.
map can give you clear guidance around what are those areas in your life that are potentially fulfilled, which ones are potentially lacking, not because you don't have the money to spend to fill them, but you just haven't had the time or the awareness of, right? So you can ask yourself, what are those experiences that I still want to live in my lifetime? What areas are they satisfying? How are the ways that I potentially want to leave some guidance in terms of how I'd like future generations to use some of the resources we've captured? What are the conversations that we want to have amongst the different generations of how potentially accumulating financial resources have impacted other areas of the life? And do you have those healing conversations while you're still alive?
Oh, right. I mean, that's a huge part of this work, really,
Yeah.
is the willingness to have those conversations and
Mm-hmm.
they aren't easy, right?
No. Mm-mm.
They aren't
No.
easy.
No.
Well, as we wrap up our conversation, are there any kind of parting words that you'd like to leave listeners with?
Yeah, so many, but I would say a couple. I would say, again, if there's anything you take away today is money and wealth are not the same thing, right? We
Mhm.
confuse them. And so money is a tool in technology, wealth is a state of well-being. So the easiest way to start to tap into your portfolio of wealth without adding one more dollar to your bank account is to start to pay attention. Remember, what you appreciate appreciates, but start to pay attention to what are those things that bring you satisfaction. And so I like to tell people do a 30-day satiation challenge, which is for the
Mm.
next 30 days. At the end of your day, write down 3 things that satisfied you. Not necessarily gratitude. You don't have to be grateful for them, but that satisfied you. For example, Sarah, this conversation will make my list tonight. I love meaningful
Oh,
conversation, but maybe it was writing a hard client email that you were like putting off and you finally got the courage to do it. Maybe it was something, an amazing workout that, again, not that you wanted to go, but you ended up doing. What satisfies you? Maybe it was a meal that you cooked for your family. Do that for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, sit down and read through all your strategies and start to recognize what are you already putting in place in your life to feel more fulfilled. And sit with the knowing that you actually know how to build your wealth portfolio. We just need a framework to be able to add that into our diversification of our lives to bring more meaning, more purpose, more satisfaction.
I love that. Well, this conversation will also be on my list.
Yay! That makes me happy.
We're recording this the end of March, so I think I'll take you up on the challenge and I'll start that April 1st.
Okay, go for it. Yes, do not give yourself April Fools. It does count, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, feel free to report back. I'd love to hear how it went.
I absolutely will. I'll send you a message. All right,
Okay.
Elizabeth. Well, it's hard to say goodbye, but again, just a big thank you for being here on the show. I know that I've taken away so much, and listeners absolutely will. We'll link your book, The Power of Enough, in the show notes, along with where to find you and also the
Yep.
Wealth Mandala for listeners to do that exercise. And again, just thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. Such a pleasure.